Good morning, DawgNation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by ServPro. What a show we have for you. Getting ready for Georgia-Florida, the rivalry game we believe matters more than any other. Our friend Eddie the Blind Squirrel sits on our desk as a reminder of that. So much of the nomenclature around this show points back to that, and today, you better believe, we are all over. We're also going to laugh at what was kind of the odd feud potentially burgeoning with Kirby Smart and a member of the entertainment community. We'll have some fun with that. Also, two great guests. And we're going to kind of hit them back to back. Very, very fast-paced show. Connor Riley, Jake Fromm, going back to back, getting ready. And by the way, what a great week to have Jake on the show, given the fact that some of Jake's best games in a Georgia uniform came against, as we like to call them, the lousy, stinking Gators. So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff here, all of it fun. We're glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by ServPro, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by ServPro, cleaning, restoration, construction.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I have a little bit of an odd theory I want to share with you just for a moment, and it's going to help set us up for where we need to go here today. The theory goes like this. Which is that the games in college football now that are the biggest are bigger than they've ever been before. You think about the number of games that achieve a television audience of larger than 10 million people. Y'all, that's very hard to do. College football, especially in the SEC, does that on a fairly regular basis. We've never had big games that feel bigger than the biggest games do right now. But there is, I think, a consequence to that. And I can't fully explain why this is. It's just something that I've noticed to be true. That as the big games get bigger, it's almost as if it sucks some of the oxygen away from what I think of as the middle class of games, the middle category of games. You know, the weak games against lesser opponents, I think, feel the way they always do. But the middle class, the middle tier of games, I don't know that some of those games quite feel as big as they once did. It's not because people care about college football less. They obviously don't. It's because the big games are now so big and people are so magnetically drawn towards those big games that there's almost just not enough oxygen left for the games in that next category. Perhaps your mileage may vary. You may see it differently, and for all I know, you may be right. As I told you before, this is a little bit of a weird observation, but it's one that I've certainly noticed. And the way that plays out for us this week is I do feel like last couple of years, I'm in the role of having to remind people, hey, this is the rivalry game that matters more than any other. Good Georgia fans are Gator haters first and foremost. That's what we do, reminding people, boy, this game means a lot to a lot of people. Historically, it's always mattered. That's one of those things we do. And to some people, the fact that we have to do that is an example of kids these days just don't know the history. Georgia fans are spoiled because they win so much, or blah, blah, blah. And honestly, I don't quite know if any of that is really true. I assume it's probably not. I just think that there's a natural consequence when you make these gigantic games, playing against Bama, going to Texas, Tennessee 2022, some of the stuff that Georgia's done in recent years, when these games are so big, you can't make everything equally that big, and so therefore there's going to be a little bit of an erosion to the history and tradition of games that have mattered. And I think when you look around to the rivalry we call the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, this one this week does feel a little bit different, despite the fact that it's got so much history behind it. I really believe if you're about my age, this game is almost, I like to think of it as like the Gen X Super Bowl, because for those of us who are in that Gen X, 90s baby type categories here, this game just means a lot because we grew up watching Florida win this one so much. And so therefore, for many of us, Georgia can never be Florida enough to totally pay them back for what we lived through 90s, early 2000s. This was just a rough time to be a Georgia fan in this rivalry. So the fact that Georgia's dominated these lousy, stinking Gators as much as they have, we think that's great. We say more of it. But if you're not quite Gen X, it may not quite mean the same thing to you it means to some of us. Now, someone who's decidedly in that Gen X category is Kirby Smart. Obviously, he's got a lot of memories, both as a coach and a player, when it comes to the Georgia-Florida game. But this time of year, getting ready for a big game, he's not going to give much of that away. Doesn't like playing into the storylines, doesn't like playing into the narratives. He did, though, yesterday talk about some of the memories he has of the game we think of as the world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
A lot of memories because I've seemed like I've coached every Georgia-Florida game that I've been involved in has been there. So it's been some really good battles, some great games, and then played there, I guess, 3 or 4 times. I'm not sure how many times because we had one here. But I don't think there's anything that really sticks out like just as, some great wins and some tough losses.
Do you think for 2 seconds there's nothing, Kirby says, that sticks out about this game? Do you think for 2 seconds that's true? Watch the way in which he always celebrates after Georgia beats Florida, jumping into the stands, running around high-fiving people. Watch the way that he celebrates. Kirby Smart is an alumnus of the University of Georgia. Both as a coach and a player, he has left it on the line in Jacksonville, Florida. And yet game week, when asked the question, yeah, there's not much that really sticks out about this game. That is verifiably untrue. Of course there is. He just doesn't want to talk about it right now, which is totally his prerogative, which means for those of us who are trying to fan the flames of the rivalry for Saturday, we may have to depend on the other side to do that just a bit. And luckily, Florida, lame as they are more than capable of giving us at least a little bit of a log to throw on the fire to make the rivalry feel a little hotter than it might. Let me show you on social media from last night. I saw this on the X platform, Florida putting out a post of Brandon Spikes making a tackle against Georgia, which is what it now a long time ago. And this is the thing that, we joked about this in the Auburn game, that if you watch their pregame hype video of all their great moments, there's like nothing from the last 10 years. We're getting very close to Florida having at least 10 years between the present day and its best football memories. When you're having to dig like this deep into the past to find your good memories, things are tough for your program, and the Florida program obviously is on hard times. But honestly, I'm actually not even that mad about it. At least they're stirring the pot. At least they're doing their thing. Brandon Spikes had a big hit on a Georgia running back going back now many years ago when I had no gray hair. I don't even think I had kids at that point. It's a long time ago. But nonetheless, that Florida's saying, hey, remember back when we were good? Remember when we were doing some stuff? That's obviously what they're doing there. So Florida trying to do its part to add a little spice to the rivalry, and we are not mad about it. On the flip side, when it comes to the history we all share here, Georgia fans hate Florida. Florida fans jealous of Georgia. How much does Kirby Smart talk to his team about the intensity that exists in the stands? The Florida folks wearing their blue and orange and their jean shorts, Georgia fans dressed in a very classy manner in the way you've come to expect. How much does Kirby talk to these guys about all that? Kirby talked about that too yesterday.
Not a lot. I mean, we talk about the things that are facts about the history of the game, which are like, the team that rushes, the team that does this, the team that things that are obvious, explosive plays. You have more explosive plays than them, you're probably going to win. You have less turnovers than them, you're probably going to win. If you rush the ball better, you've got a good chance of winning. There's things that are facts about that, and then there's things that are just part of history. And to be honest with you, I'm focused on what we got to do to play well and be at our best, and I think we control that.
Listen, I get that, and that's probably what a good coach needs to do. But as someone who does like the stirring of the pot, as someone who does like to fan the flames, as someone who tries to make that happen as much as I possibly could, if you are looking for something this week beyond just a lame social media post from a bygone era of Florida football, if you're looking for something else to maybe get you going, maybe get you a little fired up, get you a little ready for this one, keep in mind that one of the television broadcasters for Saturday's game is Jesse Palmer. Jesse himself is a former lousy, stinking Gator, although I guess once a lousy, stinking Gator, always a lousy, stinking Gator. He's also the guy the other day, and we tried to make a big deal about this at the time, and a lot of Georgia fans had some fun with this too, who was pretty critical of the Georgia defense after having watched them play. Now, Georgia fans will tell you, hey, the Georgia defense does need to play better. And I'm not here to dispute that. But if we can find a little motivation to get them to do so, we're not above doing that there as well. So keep in mind, this will be the first time Jesse Palmer will be broadcasting a Georgia game since the dust up after the game when Jesse Palmer was critical of how unimaginative Georgia was on third down and how bad the Georgia defense was overall. So much so that it did get a response from Kirby at the time. Let me give you a reminder of it.
Kirby, Jesse Palmer on the air Saturday said Georgia's defense needs more creativity on third downs. Seems to have guys lined up on most third downs in the same spots. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't know. You'd have to ask Jesse. I'm happy for Jesse. I'm glad he makes a living getting to make those decisions. I focus on what gives us a chance to be successful, play well, execute well, who's in the game, what strategy do they have on offense? Are they going fast? Are they going slow? I don't concern myself with it much.
So I think you already know this. I'm going to tell you anyway. Much like when Kirby Smart says he has no particular memories of the Georgia-Florida game, we know that's demonstrably untrue. When Kirby says he's happy for Jesse, we know that Kirby Smart is not happy for Jesse in that particular moment. That's just the way that he talks. The sarcasm, I think, kind of gives that away. So if you're looking for something beyond just avoid turnovers, the team that runs the ball better typically wins. If you want a little something to spice it up your team this week, maybe going back to the Jesse Palmer we think that's fertile soil. Maybe you have a chance to do a little bit of that if you want to. But ultimately, Kirby's going to be Kirby, and Kirby is a coach who's very much used to doing things his way. And as he says over and over again, these forms of external motivation, whether it be lame Florida posts on social media, lame commentary from ex-Gators now working in the media, or anything, even the crowd in the stands, that if you need this to get ready for a game like this, you may already be in trouble. In fact, he said almost that same thing yesterday. Here's Kirby one more time.
No, other than explain it. There's not a big rah-rah hoopla. You're responsible for your own ability to get up. If you can't get up for a game like this, you don't need to be playing.
So listen, no rah-rah hoopla, Kirby Smart says, but we always have to believe that probably a lot of that is the external conversation, that privately deep down, this team knows this game means a lot to a lot of people, and it means a lot to Kirby Smart in particular because of his history as a Georgia graduate. So we'll let Florida do what they do. They have a history of doing some dumb stuff prior to the Georgia-Florida game. It usually ends up being a potential source of motivation for UGA. We're all about that, and we think there's a chance that comes out here this week. Either way, it's a big rivalry game. It's a chance for Georgia to get another win in what we think is a final chapter for this rivalry with the stadium changing over the course of the next couple of years. So count us among those that can't quite wait for Saturday to get here. Georgia-Florida, a rivalry that means a ton to us, and the exciting opportunity to watch Georgia win it one more time. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Presented today by ServPro. We are happy that you are with us. No matter how you get here, video, 10 a.m., radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 Ref podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just thrilled that you're part of the show, and great to be with our friends at ServPro today, too, or at least to have them be with us. I love what ServPro does for all of you. And I had a chance to tell that to the ServPro folks really just last week, to thank them for the way in which they've served our audience, taking care of people when it comes to an important time in their life. If you got fire damage or water intrusion in your home, the mess that can create, obviously you want to get that taken care of, and that's what our friends at ServPro, that's what they do. And listen, I'm thankful that they do that. I'm talking about whether it be guys we hung out with before. Brent from ServPro was at our bowling event last week. All kinds of good people who've been a part of that. Rick Northern, obviously a big guy that's doing a lot of great stuff there. I had a chance to tell the entire ServPro team last week, listen, love what you do. Thanks for taking care of our audience, and we're proud of everything that you are just making possible here, because when you get a big mess that needs to be cleaned up, of course you want ServPro to be able to do that. Their restoration specialists can get it put back together looking like it never even happened. That is what ServPro is all about. Also, each franchise independently owned and operated. And so when you talk to these guys, Rick, Brent, other folks like that, you're talking to people who are their life's work, the way in which they provide for their families is by taking care of people in a messy cleanup situation. So sometimes, obviously, we're kind of bumping into some weather here right now. Some of this is weather-related catastrophe. Whatever your story is, ServPro wants to help you. So find them online, servpro.com, SERV, servpro.com, SERV, servpro.com for more on that today. Okay, before we dive in more in the show, Jake Fromm coming up, Connor Riley as well. Let me also remind you that coming up in just a little while here, we got a big event taking place. A lot of you have been wanting DawgNation to do a big event out in public again. We're about to do that. We're calling it DawgNation on Tap. It's going to take place Thursday, November 13th, leading into the big one in Athens that particular Saturday against the team that wears burnt orange. So that's going to be a big day, and we want you to be a part of it. The DawgNation team is going to be on hand for this. We've got special guests that are going to be there. We're confirming a lot of this right now. It's going to be an amazing experience from the Terrapin Beer Company tap room, the brewery and tap room, right there in Athens, Thursday, November 13th. It's from 6 to 9 p.m. We're going to have a great Q&A, get a chance to meet a lot of great folks, including the DawgNation team. Your first beer is going to be complimentary, courtesy of our friends at Terrapin. Food that day as well, courtesy of our friends at Cercheros. So that's going to be a great opportunity. Terrapin Beer and Cercheros together. Who wouldn't love that? And as a special awesome experience, the big game that upcoming Saturday in Athens, somebody's going to have a chance to win tickets there that night at Terrapin Brewery in the tap room there for the event we're calling DawgNation on Tap. Now, this is a first of its kind experience for us. The food, of course, is free, complimentary just for being there. Your first beer, courtesy of Terrapin, is the same way. So there's no cost to enter. But we are going to ask you to RSVP for this. If you'll go to DawgNation.com/on-tap, you can RSVP to be there. We're going to ask you to do that. RSVP for your chance to be a part of that. Can't wait to see you at the Terrapin Brewery coming up in Athens, November 13th for a great event. Now, let's get ready to go around the doghouse. Of course, it's presented today by our friends at Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. And I want to go back to something we talked about yesterday. You will remember ESPN College Game Day on Saturday. Jared Curtis, the Georgia quarterback commit, in attendance for Vanderbilt's game, what turned out to be a win against Missouri. Pretty public pitch to Curtis was made on camera that day by the famous comedian Nate Bargatze. I want you to get a reminder of Nate on camera yesterday making his pitch to Jared Curtis. This was from Saturday.
It's hard not to just remind Jared Curtis how much I would love for you to come to Vanderbilt. And we're local kids, become best friends, bud.
A lot of Georgia fans love Nate Bargatze. We talked about this yesterday. You're almost a little disappointed to know that Nate's working against Georgia on TV like that. It did create a moment yesterday, though, where Kirby Smart got to respond to the public pitch. Now, you can't mention Jared Curtis by name, but just in general, your recruits being talked about on TV. Kirby had a chance to respond to that. Kirby mostly dismisses the entire thing, but this is Kirby from yesterday.
No, I mean, I don't get caught up in it much, Mark. I don't look at the stuff like that and just recruit the best job we can and sell what we have and talk to the kids and communicate with the kids that we talk to and trust them for what they tell us and not get into gimmicks and propaganda stuff.
So in this particular battle, obviously we're on the side of Kirby Smart, but we do like Nate too. We think he's very funny. There is something really entertaining to me about what if Nate then responded back to Kirby, who you say, calling this a gimmick, and all of a sudden we got a very unexpected war of words between Kirby Smart and Nate Bargatze. I think that'd probably be a pretty funny thing overall. Not likely to get that, but I think that the proof is in the pudding of what Kirby Smart says, that ultimately this was just a gimmick. I think some of the reporting on this from a national standpoint was frankly a little bit weird. And when it's all said and done, it certainly appears that Jared Curtis is, as he always was, a very solid UGA commit. In fact, I'll show you a couple of things here online from some of the national reporters on this. Let me start here. I believe it's Steve Wiltfong who has this. Actually, we'll start with the Rivals post overall, where according to Rivals, Jared Curtis tells them that he was really just going there for game day, that for all the hype his visit got, the truth is he was just there for game day. He tells that to Rivals in a story with Pete Nakos that came out yesterday. yesterday. Steve Wiltfong had some more information on this too, also saying, I don't know if we have maybe we don't have the Wiltfong, but also basically saying that he was still 100% committed to Georgia. Yeah, Wiltfong reporting that he's 100% committed to Georgia following his second visit to Vanderbilt in the last week. So there'd been some connection, there'd been some talking, but according to the national reporters who've been on this, Curtis still as solid to Georgia as ever. And my takeaway on this remains what it was yesterday, which is ultimately all this shows you is what a big deal Jared Curtis potentially is. I think he's the best prospect in the country for this class. He certainly played that way, and his eventual arrival in Athens is a major boost for the future of the Georgia program. This is as big a deal as it can be at the moment here, and I think the Georgia fans should be acquainting themselves with what kind of quarterback prospect Jared Curtis is at the moment. We'll also make that around the doghouse. It's poured today by our friends at Mercier Orchards Hard Cider, and I know a lot of you are enjoying a trip up to the North Georgia mountains this past week, even though Georgia football. It's a great time to be there. And Mercier Orchards and walk the grounds, pick some apples yourself, see the process of how these apples become the fried pies they're famous for. You wouldn't believe how many millions of fried pies they make each and every year. It's amazing that operation they have. But also we like talking about the Mercier Orchards hard cider because let's face it, who wouldn't love a delicious can of hard cider or on tap at your favorite restaurant? And so many of you are enjoying that too. So if you can't get up to North Georgia to experience the picturesque beauty of Mercier Orchards up there, the great taste of Mercier Orchards hard cider can be brought to you at your local supermarket, your favorite beverage store, even at your favorite restaurant on tap. We want you to ask for Mercier Orchards hard cider. There's all kinds of varieties, from the sweet flavor of the just peachy to the more tart flavor of the grumpy granny, and everything else in between. It's a great time to try it. We think you're going to love it, and we just like the idea of supporting this Georgia-grown company. So as you're out shopping, ask for Mercier Orchards hard cider. We found that really goes a long way in getting it stocked at places where it isn't currently found, and everybody else can enjoy a story we're trying to tell of some really great things happening in the North Georgia mountains when it comes to Mercier Orchards now making Mercier Orchards hard cider. Make sure you enjoy today. It's mercier-orchards.com/hard-cider for more on that. You can also Google and search, or whatever your favorite search engine is, Mercier Orchards hard cider. Mercier spelled Mercier. Probably a pretty good way to find that. We'll hope you'll do that today. All right. Glad to have Mercier Orchards hard cider bringing around the doghouse to us. Also, busy show for us. We're going to hit back-to-back guests here. It's Jake Fromm coming up in a moment. I'd like to talk to Jake about. But for now, on everything about Georgia and its preparations for Florida, let's speak to Connor Riley, who's playing a little hurt today, but happy to have him nonetheless on DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
As an homage to those who have spent a lot of time in Jacksonville feeling a little sick in and around the cocktail party, Connor feeling a little sick prior to the cocktail party today, but we're happy to have him on the show nonetheless. Connor, you and I talked about this a little bit off air over the course of the last couple of weeks. It is just I think, a natural consequence of how big the big games have gotten, that the medium-sized games, it almost feels to me that the oxygen gets taken out of those games a little bit. And I would say that to a degree, the Georgia-Florida rivalry has probably suffered from that some. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I think a lot of the discussion around this game this week, it to me feels like people are trying to speak a Georgia upset into existence. And I think the fact that the line only came in at 8 points, I think it's currently down to 7.5, I think sort of speaks to that. It's a rivalry that has become very one-sided under Kirby Smart since 2017, his second year in Athens. I believe he's 7-1 in games against Florida, and the one loss back in 2020, where granted the Florida offense played great that day. Stetson Bennett left the game with a shoulder injury. So this series has not exactly been competitive for really quite some time since Dan Mullen in his early days there. Billy Napier gone. It has taken a back seat a bit, even though this year there is I think a specialness with it being the last time this game will be played in this particular stadium and the last time it will be played in Jacksonville until those two teams return here again in 2028.
And I told this to John Stinchcomb yesterday. I think this is a bigger deal than people probably realize, because a lot of my memories, even the awful games that I sat through, and Connor, I said this before you joined us, this is the Gen X Super Bowl, because when I was a kid, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I sat through some rough ones here. But it was still something that felt somewhat special, because you had the Hart Bridge, you had the Sunset, you had the St. Johns River, But in this new state-of-the-art renovated stadium in a couple of years, I don't know that you're going to be able to see all that the same way you once did. I do think the cocktail party as we've known it, this is probably overstating things a bit, but that's what I do. The cocktail party as we've known it, I think that kind of ends this year, and whatever it is going forward after a couple of years of renovation, brand new stadium, it's going to be a lot sleeker, I think. I just think it's going to feel like something totally different after that.
It's going to be a lot more corporate. And I think, to your point, the lack of corporateness, the sleaziness of Jacksonville, if you will, I think contributes to the charm of this rivalry and what it has become. And to your point, BA, I mean, I know you're a good bit older than I am, but like I came up in this rivalry and it was dominated by Florida, where the 2007 game was an aberration. And, my first memory when someone asks, maybe not the very first one in terms of chronologically, but the one that I vividly remember was the 2015 game with Fatone Bauta, a game that ultimately led to the end of the Mark Richt era and ultimately, I think, ushered in Kirby Smart's time here at the University of Georgia. But we were talking to Drew Bobo yesterday, and he was asked about his first Georgia-Florida memory. And he brought up the 2012 Georgia-Florida game where Jarvis Jones famously punched it out from behind of Jordan Reed. You had a big Malcolm Mitchell touchdown in that game, and that was, Drew Bobo's first real memory. Drew Bobo was about 8 or 9 years old at the time that game was played. That game was played 13 years ago, and it just made me feel a little bit older than I would like to feel. But, I do agree with your main point there that this does feel like the rivalry is changing and it's going to feel a little bit different. And the fact that, to your point, and this is something you and I agree on, the big games feel bigger and the not big games feel smaller than ever. And just the way this game has trended with Florida, and look, they're trying to find a new coach now to hopefully restore some of the intensity in this rivalry. But with Billy Napier losing all 3 of his games against Georgia by double digits, the rivalry just does not have the same feel at this point in time because of that.
Okay, so I think there are 2 big storylines on the field on Saturday, one involving each team, and I want to walk through those for a moment. And I'll just be honest, I have been a little more anxious about this game ever since Billy Napier was fired, because maybe this is the conspiratorial side of my brain coming out, but it just all feels too intentional. This notion of they knew they were going to fire him for a while. I think that since they lost to South Florida, it was obvious this had to happen. And eventually they all knew they were going to do it after the Mississippi State game, as was reported a few days ago, either win or loss. It was going to be Napier's last game. It turned out to be. It certainly seems to me that they're going to try to lean on the element of surprise with a play caller that really nobody knows about, the quarterback's coach getting promoted, with, the interim coach Billy Gonzalez, who's this Florida lifer who everybody there seems to like. He seems to like Florida. DJ Lagway has said some very positive things recently. Certainly no thought of opting out or looking to he seems really dialed in right now. I think that Florida's trying to circle the wagons here, and the attempt of whether that's successful or not, to me, is a huge storyline in this game. It is the most interesting thing from a Florida standpoint of, is there something they can do, a la Jerry Neuheisel from UCLA a few weeks ago, that Georgia's just not ready for, especially given the fact that some of these attempts to outmaneuver Georgia to begin the game are clearly working for a lot of teams right now.
I mean this as a scathing insult, and in a way, because one, I've been very impressed with what Brent Key has done at Georgia Tech and the way that he has reinvigorated that program. But Florida is treating this Georgia game now like Georgia Tech treats this Georgia game. And quite frankly, that should not be the way that a Florida program, a program that has won national championships in the last 25 years in the 21st century, should be treating a game like this. This game is Florida's Super Bowl. They are going to throw everything they have at Georgia in this game, not dissimilar to a season ago, where you look at the way Georgia Tech did things intentionally going into that game to prepare for their game against Georgia. And I think Georgia was a little caught off guard by Georgia Tech a season ago, and that's why that game played out in the manner in which it did. I think Georgia having a bye week before this game against Florida, I think, is a significant advantage for them, because I do think if Florida and Georgia were playing the week right after Napier had been fired, because it could have been clearly telegraphed that was coming, I do think that Florida would have a chance to sneak up on Georgia a little bit more. Not dissimilar to your point, what we saw with UCLA and Penn State earlier this season. But because Georgia also got that extra week, they've got some extra things to throw in. They've got some extra things to potentially prepare for, more time to study. I do think that helps mitigate a little bit against what Florida, I think, is very clearly trying to do. But to me, it really speaks to the level that Florida has fallen to, where they are on this sort of level and stooping to this sort of view of the Georgia game as their Super Bowl. When this is a program, every Florida fan out there will tell you that, no, our Super Bowl should be getting an SEC championship, winning an SEC championship. Something they haven't done since 2008, trying to get eventually to a college football playoff, maybe even a national title. But for right now, with where this program is at this point in 2025, they're turning the Georgia game into their Super Bowl, and they're going to throw everything they have at it.
And the flip side, when it comes to Georgia, I have said, if I'm being honest, that I perceive the ceiling for this team right now to be something south of a national championship. And the Ole Miss game doesn't really change that for me completely. It was a great win, and it showed me a lot. But a national championship is still a really lofty goal for any team. And thus far, it has not quite felt to me that Georgia is a national championship level team. However, this game, and to a certain extent on the road at Mississippi State, if you win by a couple of touchdowns, if you can exceed expectations, if you can make it look relatively easy, as you just described, against a team that's made this game its Super Bowl, then maybe that's an example that Georgia is turning a corner, and maybe that's an example of Georgia's ceiling either being raised over the course of the last few weeks or just being higher than I gave it credit for. Right now, I'm only thinking about the Florida game, but I'd say the same thing about Mississippi State too, that if Georgia goes in there and doesn't mess around, if it shows, I don't want to say dominance, but a little bit more thorough level of success on both sides of the ball for 4 quarters against a team that really is throwing the kitchen sink at them, then that's maybe an example that Georgia really is, at perhaps the right time, turning a corner that it hasn't turned at any point in time in this season yet. Do you think that's fair analysis?
To that point, I do agree with that. There's nothing I can see in really, in my opinion, these next 3 weeks, Florida, at Mississippi State, home against Texas, that will get me to really reconsider Georgia as a national championship team. I'm with you. I did not see this as a national championship winning team prior to the season. I've been on record, especially when you compare with people on the DawgNation staff, that I think am lower on what this Georgia team could be. All that being said, I do think that this is a Georgia team where, and I know we've said this before and we haven't yet seen it, if Georgia can jump out quick in this game, start this game fast, something they haven't always done, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But if they're up early, it feels very similar to the old Mike Tyson phrase, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And, Florida can talk about this and they can say all the right things and they can make it seem like they're committed and not opting out. What happens when you're down 14-0 or 10-0 in the second quarter and Georgia's got the ball? What is your willingness to keep playing and keep going and not let go of the rope at that point in time? So I think this is a Georgia team. I think they are mentally tougher than Florida going into this game. I think they've shown that over the course of the season and the way they've found ways to win games. And with this Florida program, the way they lost to South Florida, the way, quite frankly, they should have lost to Mississippi State the last time they were out there. And I know they were dealing with a lot of strangeness. But I think the mental toughness aspect of this game is so stark between these two programs at this point in time, where it seems like Florida just sort of seems to crumble in the fourth quarter and the second half of games, whereas that is when Georgia has been at their best. And I do think that makes a big difference and shows up once again on Saturday.
Let me squeeze in one final thing. Obviously, the absence of Colby Young is going to be a big deal here. Georgia does have some options, whether it's Noah Thomas or, one of the things I want to talk about on the show at some point this week is the way in which Dylan Bell is emerging right now. Also, I guess more the tight ends. You saw a lot of it against Ole Miss. What do you think the immediate, aftermath of the Colby Young injury ends up being for the Georgia offense?
I wouldn't change a thing I'm doing with Dylan Bell. I think he's playing some of the best football of his career, and the role that they have found for him, I think suits his skill set perfectly, where he's able to play a little bit with Zach Branch. He's able to move around and do a lot of different things for this Georgia offense. I'd be curious to see what they're able to get out of Noah Thomas in this game and see, again, he's not going to step directly into the role that Colby Young had, because I think Colby Young was just a better football player than Noah Thomas was. I think the way that they might try to make up for the production is those tight ends, because I think you've seen them make some impressive moves, win in coverage, and do, I think, some of the things that you saw Colby do in terms of making guys miss, especially in terms of the second and third level there. So I think early on, maybe you try and get Noah Thomas going. Obviously, we've seen him do big things in the SEC before, but try and get him going, and I think really lean on the tight end, similar to what you saw them do against Ole Miss, where I think they finished with 9 catches, 85 yards. Replicating the touchdowns is going to be tough, but I think that level of production where you're using Lawson Lucky and Oscar Delp, short, intermediate ranges of the field, and letting them break a tackle and turn potentially, a 6 or 7 yard gain into a 10 or 11 yard gain. I think that's, in my opinion, maybe the best way you try and go and replace the production you're losing by Colby Young.
I tell you this, Connor, I always appreciate that strong analysis. I know you're covering in Athens today. We're going to hear from some more Georgia players getting ready for the cocktail party on Saturday. Appreciate all of that. Thanks for being with us, and I do truly hope you feel better soon, and we'll look forward to having you back here on DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro very soon as well.
Yep, as always, it was a pleasure.
Indeed, that's the case. Good stuff there from Connor Riley. We're lucky to be able to bounce from guest to guest and keep it moving here on a day like this. Strong analysis there from Connor from Athens as Georgia continues its preparations. And now we'll get ready to transition and shift to a Kroger Fresh Take and bring in the former Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm, who I always love talking about and talking to on this particular week because some of the great moments he had in Jacksonville against the team we like to call those lousy, stinking Gators. Jake, it's great to have you here as part of a Kroger Fresh Take today. You're looking sharp, by the way. Is that a sport coat on today? You look good. Either way, good to have you on the program. Thanks for being with us for a Kroger Fresh Take.
Always glad to be here, Brandon. Thank you, man. Excited to go and beat the Gators. And yeah, man, just trying to dress for success today and get after it a little bit. So
I like
appreciate
it.
you having me.
I like it. I think that's a good strategy for life. So I want to talk a lot about Georgia, Florida. Let me squeeze in one thing before we get there. We've talked and we've had a good time with Nate Bargatze, the comedian, talking about Jared Curtis on TV. You were obviously at one point in time a high-profile quarterback, and you were featured on TV a lot back then with the documentary and things like that. But as a young guy who – only a few years ago, you were essentially a child, and now you're getting talked about on TV. Gameday, famous comedian, making the pitch to you. When he was in Athens, he had Luke Bryan hanging out with him on the sideline. What's that like to go from total anonymity, where almost nobody knows who you are, nobody cares who you are, because although you had Little League World Series, you're a little different, but it's still you're kind of in the shadows, and then suddenly really, really famous out of nowhere to the point now everybody's talking about you, whether you want them to or not. What's it like for Jared Curtis to go through some of that?
Yeah, it happens really, really fast. All of a sudden, one day you wake up, and for whatever reason, everybody thinks you're a big deal, all because you can throw a pigskin a little bit better than the next guy. I think it's really important to have a good group of people around you. Talk about your upbringing, a head on your shoulders. I think because it can go off the rails pretty fast, and what they're facing today is way more than anything that I ever went through. I mean, now you're talking about throwing around, dollars and NIL deals and what kind of commercial I can get on and who's going to give me, the nice and brightest, fanciest car. And man, there's just a lot out of high school now. They have agents, a lot of conversations, but I just think if you can keep that wholesome group around you to keep your head on your shoulders. And the people that I enjoyed having around me were the people that told me things that I didn't want to hear.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's dangerous to be around people that just, yes people and
Sure.
want to please you. And that's good and fine and dandy. But the people that I loved the most were the people that would tell me something that I needed to hear. And it may have not have been something that I wanted to hear, but I respected them even more for telling me that.
Have you seen much of Curtis, highlights or anything like that? Maybe you know him personally. Have you had much? How much has Jared Curtis even been in your orbit, I guess is what I'm asking.
To be quite honest with you, not a ton. Seen a few highlights here and there. Here he's a fantastic recruit and checks all the boxes. Man, it's just the college football landscape's just different, right? You can recruit out of high school, you can recruit from across the college football landscape with the transfer portal, and the way teams and colleges are building their roster just really kind of depends on a year-to-year basis, right? This Georgia football team is young. Kirby's trying to do it the right way through development, and then you look at Vandy, who's having a ton of success this year, right? They just have a bunch of old guys, right? I mean, they're playing with a semi-pro football team just because of the experience that they have on their roster. So it is very different from team to team and how they want to build their rosters. And sometimes you may your winning window you may not have time to go and develop guys out of high school. And it's just a completely different pitch from a head coaching perspective now.
I want to ask about Georgia, Florida. I want to go back to 2017 for a moment because you played in the win that turn this rivalry, because Georgia has mostly won every game since then except for 2020, and everybody knows the pandemic doesn't count. Georgia has won every game other than that. So now you've got this entire generation of Georgia fans, not just younger than me, but even younger than you, that all they know is dominating Florida. But you played at a time in which beating Florida was still a really big deal, and gosh knows we hope they beat them again this particular Saturday. Here's my question. How much was that something that the team was aware of? Y'all were way better than Florida that year. You were expected to win that game. You ultimately did in blowout fashion. Florida's still running their mouth and doing all that kind of stuff too. But how much was it known amongst the team that this is a rivalry that Georgia has not been having success in? The last couple of games had gone Florida's way, and those were not good teams that had beaten Georgia. How much was that something y'all knew about going into that 2017 game, which for the most part flipped this rivalry?
Yeah, I would say a decent bit. I mean, I think there's got to be a little bit of pride going into that game, especially for me growing up in Middle South Georgia, right? You got Richard LeCount on the team. You got Malik Herring, guys that, from Georgia have to hear about it. Especially where we grew up, there's Florida fans kind of littered all throughout, and they're going to be the loudest, right? Because, they've been winning lately. And so you just hear about it growing up, you see it on the TV, and there's just something a little different about this game because you go play in Jacksonville, it's split 50-50, and it's just, there's a little something different about it. And for me, there was always a sense of pride of wanting to go out and beat these guys. Never been a fan of the Florida Gators for whatever reason. Dad made me go down there to go to a football camp back in high school. And, I never liked it, right? I always wanted to be a dog, grew up a dog, but
it's only like you, Jake.
These guys.
The fact that you never liked it is why we like you, by the way.
So I always wanted to beat these guys, right? And really, glad and thankful that I was able to do that. We were able to do that and continue to have that success, since 2017. But there is something different about it. I think there's a sense of pride, and I think that's just what makes Georgia great.
So in 2018, 2019, you got a completely different experience where, okay, now Georgia's had the success, it's won the game, but now Florida's better than they'd been. In 2018 game in particular, this is a top 10 matchup. You played a lot of pressure that day coming off. Georgia had lost the previous game to LSU, and I think that you had – I might put this up there with any game you had in your career, one of the better games we've seen from a Georgia quarterback for the most part in the Kirby Smart era. What was it like then playing in the Georgia-Florida game when it's the biggest game that Georgia might play that season, where you had to play well because your chance at playing for the SEC championship, all that was on the line to come through in such a big way? 2019 game was a little bit like that too, but the 2018 game I just have these vivid memories of. What was it like playing in Jacksonville when it was arguably the biggest regular season game of the season for Georgia?
Yeah, a lot of pressure in that game coming off that loss at LSU, right? We were trying to get back up on top of the mountain, right, from the 2017 season, and a lot of outside noise that week. Had Justin behind me. Everybody wanted to, see Justin get thrown in there, and for me, it was just kind of a quote unquote kind of pissed off week of practice. Yeah. And man, just trying to get back to playing good ball and executing, and had a good week of practice. And for me, the mindset was just to come in and cut it loose and kind of play with no regrets. And a really big game. I think it was a very pivotal game in our season, and really in my career as well, of beating a really good football team in a much needed time of the season. And we were able to kind of propel off that win and into the later half of the year. But yeah, that was a big game and a very pivotal point, I think, of my career.
I want to squeeze in one final question for you. Let me remind you, though, it's our Kroger Fresh Day with Jake Fromm, and of course, we're coming up on Halloween. In fact, my daughters remind me of that every day. Daddy, we have not bought our candy. We have not bought our candy. We got to get the candy. So trust me, the countdown to Halloween, I'm very well briefed on in my household. And we're going to buy our candy. Of course, we're going to our local Kroger to do it. And if you want the candy just brought right to you, you can become a Kroger Boost member, and it'll be delivered to you. They'll bring it into refrigerator trucks. Nothing's melted or anything like that. Or you can just go in store and enjoy that too. They have free pickup for you as well. And as you're going around and doing the things you're doing in the fall, well, you can get twice the fuel points on the things you're already buying at your local Kroger, such as your Halloween candy and all the other stuff to make this upcoming season so much fun. So check out more online. It's Kroger.com/boost. That's Kroger.com/boost for more on that. All right, Jake, one final one for you here. The last time we saw the Georgia offense against Ole Miss, they weren't good. They weren't excellent. They were darn near perfect. It's hard to play at that level against any team week in, week out. But how do they maintain some of that, Gunner and the rest of these guys, against Florida after a week off? Because, boy, they really had it cooking against Ole Miss.
Yeah, the offense just seems to rise to the occasion when it's needed, and the defense just seems to find a stop when it's needed as well. But specifically about the offense, it starts with Bobo and what he's been able to do throughout the week and what he's doing on game day. And the game that he is calling just seems to be excellent. What they're putting on Gunner's plate seems to be working. Man, Gunner's seeing the field really well. He's doing a lot of pre-snap things, and it's not all about what you can give him and what he can think about, but he also has to do the second part of the equation, which is execute right on the decisions that he's making. He's being able to execute, and he's able to do it with his legs as well, extend plays. So right now, Gunner's playing at a high level. Hey, how can we keep him playing at that level, and how can we continue to run the ball? The offensive line has really progressed. Right, that was a big question mark early in the year. Yep. The injuries, shifting guys around, but they've seemed to kind of settle in. There's a lot less talk about the offensive line, and with Colby going down, terrible tragic injury for this team and for him, but it just kind of opens up the window and the opportunity for guys to step up, right? You talked about Noah Thomas earlier, and the tight ends just seem to come along at the perfect time, right? Colby goes down at the beginning of that game, and all of a sudden Lawson Lucky catches 3 touchdowns. Oscar has a big day. So, hey, how can we get these tight ends involved that seem to have a lot of success in that Ole Miss game and keep building on it? But Bobo's calling it really well right now. The Bobo haters are very quiet as of right now. And, man, hey, he's doing a great job. Let's keep it up, and let's see this thing keep rolling.
I love it, Jake. Thanks for your time. Enjoy the game this weekend. Obviously, we got a lot of memories of the cocktail party. We love making new memories each year. As far as I'm concerned, Georgia can never beat them enough, never beat them bad enough, and we hope that Saturday is another chapter in all of that. So thanks for being here, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, that's right. We'll see it.
Good stuff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
I would say the thing about sports that I'm the most fascinated by are pressure performances, because when it comes to athleticism, honestly, I only can imagine what that must be like. Even at my athletic prime, I wasn't that athletic, if you know what I'm talking about. So when it comes to the feats of athleticism, that's almost like watching a magic trick as far as I'm concerned. It's just so unfamiliar to me. But everybody knows what pressure feels like. When I played sports, I felt the butterflies in my stomach. In life now, there are moments in which you need to be at your best. You got to get the big sales call or the big meeting or the whatever else. You got a little pressure. You feel that pressure. So athletes performing under pressure has always been, whatever sport we're talking about, it's the most fascinating part of sports, because it's the part of sports that in some form or fashion everyone relates to. And as I said, I'll always remember the 2018 game, because Georgia had not played well against LSU in the previous game. And Jake said it, there's all kinds of people saying all kinds of stuff, because anytime Georgia loses, there's all kinds of people that are going to be saying all kinds of stuff. And by the way, Florida was good. At least they thought they were. Dan Mullen was trying to build something. They were a top 10 team, at least from that standpoint, and they thought this was going to be the game in which they were going to beat Georgia. And they didn't. The reason why they didn't is because Jake went out there and just delivered 3 touchdowns, no picks, big performance. And Georgia was off and running for the rest of the season. They're going to win the East again. Got to the SEC championship. They gave Alabama everything it wanted. We believe probably one of the 4 best teams in the country. Lost, close to Alabama there that day, but it was a Georgia team that rallied around that moment in Jacksonville. It was a team that faced pressure head on and overcame it and conquered a rival in the midst of it. Really special moment for me among many when it comes to Georgia, Florida. Before we do our SEC through, let me give a shout out to our friends at Cercheros, because I mentioned them earlier. That's what I love about Cercheros. So we got the big DawgNation on Tap event coming up. We got to have some food. You want some food, you got to have that. And so we said, well, listen, we're thinking about football. We're talking about football. Why not, go to the folks who we think of on game day, our friends at Cercheros, for watch parties at home, for tailgates. We've encouraged you to get that catering from Cercheros. And we said, what if we get this just catered for our DawgNation on Tap event. Well, of course, Cercheros was all about that because that's just what they are. Like, they are really friendly people. I love, for me, it's the Alpharetta location. It's probably the one that I go to the most. My hometown of Gainesville's got a location too. I don't live in Gainesville now, but I'm still in Gainesville a good bit. There's 40 locations across the state, growing around the southeast. So there's a Cercheros location probably close to you wherever you are, and there are more on the way. But when you go in, you eat there in the restaurant, it's just really friendly people. It's fresh food. It's prepared for you. You can get your veggies grilled. They got like 25 toppings, something like that. You can get all of that just right there, made perfect for you. We love that about Cercheros. So they're going to be a part of DawgNation on Tap. But for whatever event you have going on, game week or beyond, coming up for holiday parties, things like that, Cercheros got you covered on that too. So find out more online. It's Cercheros.com. Let me spell it because I have a tendency to say it in a very Northeast Georgia way. It's Surcheros. Cercheros.com for more on that. All right, now, before we kind of, I guess, get too deep in what's about to happen this weekend, can we finally put a bow here for a moment on some of the bigger moments from Week 9 here? Because there are a few games that we haven't really talked about yet that I do think deserve a little bit more discussion. I'm going to kind of do this in no certain order. I think it's important to know that Tennessee is still hanging around. They beat Kentucky 56-34 on Saturday. There are a lot of teams who've played Kentucky a lot closer than that. Ole Miss did. Texas was probably lucky to beat them. Tennessee, in what is a rivalry game for them, won with some margin. I don't know what this means for Tennessee. They made the playoff a year ago. I don't know they're going to do it this year. But they are still, even after a loss to Georgia and a loss to Bama, they are still in playoff consideration. They fought Georgia down to the wire. The truth is, the reason why the Alabama game appeared to have the margin it did, now Alabama played well that day, I'm not disputing that, but you had the pick six when Tennessee was going into score that obviously turned into an Alabama score. That's a 14-point swing, and that's almost the sum total of the margin that day in that game. Tennessee is still a part of this thing. Just keep that in mind. We have not talked enough yet about the heartbreaking loss for Mississippi State against Texas, where they had the lead late in the game. Punt return, everything else, somehow Texas ends up winning the game. For Mississippi State, I mean, it's just painful. They are so hungry for like 2 more wins to make a bowl. It'd be an amazing accomplishment. It's another game in which Texas, who is also hanging around a little bit, they host Vanderbilt on Saturday. It's an interesting game. But, you know, closer than it should have been against Kentucky, closer than it should have been against Mississippi State. These road games that almost felt hand-picked because of, you know, the quality of the opponent. Texas is barely winning these games. This is a Texas team that is still alive for the playoffs, much like I just said about Tennessee. But, boy, they are a far cry from what they were supposed to be as the preseason number 1. And we're almost into November now, and they really haven't gotten much better. So we'll see what that means when Georgia hosts them coming up in a couple of weeks. And I'll also remind you, the week after this game, and right now our bandwidth is solely focused on the lousy, stinking Gators. We have no energy for anything else but Florida. But just know, when Georgia goes to Mississippi State, that is not going to be an easy football game because right now the SEC doesn't have any easy football games. We mentioned Vandy beating Missouri. We talked more about the Jared Curtis angle on this, but Vandy, it was not the prettiest game. Vandy finding a way to get another win shows that there is a very for real characteristic with this team. They have some legitimate staying power. The sad thing in this for Missouri is that Bo Pribble, the quarterback, does get hurt. Vanderbilt would like to say we're still a playoff contender too. We've only lost twice, but without Pribble, they're going to have a little bit of trouble there. So that's worth considering. Speaking of heartbreaking loss, we talked about Alabama winning yesterday. But how about the South Carolina part of this where their fans were so into it? And honestly, I got to give credit to a couple of things on this. Thing number one, this team still plays for Shane Beamer. Shane Beamer is doing a good job at South Carolina. In a world in which, I said this the other day, that it seems like every team in college football, certainly in the SEC, is either competing to make the playoff or considering firing their coach. It's worth noting that Shane Beamer in South Carolina is not in that category. Yes, they began the year as a preseason, highly ranked team. They're not going to make the playoff. But Shane Beamer is not in the failed coach category of, guys that have been fired like Brian Kelly, Billy Napier, guys that maybe will get fired like a Hugh Freeze. I just don't believe that Shane Beamer is in that category at all. This team played hard for him on Saturday, and that's saying something. Now, did he make a bad decision with his offensive coordinator? Maybe he did. Clearly that offense has not worked this year for Lenora Sellers the way that fans wanted it to, but is this team still playing hard for Shane Beamer? They are. And honestly, I know Georgia fans don't like to give credit to any other fan base, but this has been true my whole lifetime. It was true again on Saturday. These South Carolina fans, man, they show up every single Saturday, having lost the previous week almost always, hoping that this week can be different. They put their soul into making Williams-Brice Stadium a tough place to play. Did it again on Saturday, had the game in hand, and it just slipped away. It takes a lot of gumption sometimes to be a fan of one of these schools and the lumps you take in the process. You know, it just takes a lot, and these South Carolina fans show up each and every Saturday. And I know you don't like giving credit to another fan base, and I get it. You know, Georgia fans only want to like Georgia fans. I understand that. But I tell you, there is a begrudging level of respect I think you need to offer up for some of these teams that have it hard, that take their lumps, and they keep showing up. There's something about that I think is kind of cool. I'll mention also Auburn beat Arkansas on Saturday. That's a game in which it could have gotten very ugly for Hugh Freeze had he not won that. Obviously, we know what Bobby Petrino's ambition is right now. He wants to be the next Arkansas coach, so clearly they're playing hard in all this. And yet Auburn found a way to win it, so Hugh Freeze perhaps staving off something for right now will make that your SC see-through. And tomorrow we'll get more into a lot of the other games coming up this weekend. And we get some you know, everybody likes the theme, you know, it's what is it, like a separation Saturday or showdown Saturday. You get a little bit of an elimination theme with some of these games here this weekend. We'll get more into some of that coming up tomorrow. Obviously, speaking of big games on the horizon, I also want to give a shout out here to our friends at Mercedes-Benz Stadium who plan on playing host to the rivalry formerly known as Clean Old Fashioned Hay. Now, as I told you, our bandwidth right now solely focused on the game against Florida, but there is in life a necessity to occasionally plan ahead just a bit. This is an example of it. You've got a real opportunity here to get your tickets for the Georgia Tech game Black Friday afternoon in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Tech is winning right now. They're a top 10 team. They have playoff aspirations. Georgia, of course, does the same. How much fun would it be along the way to a return to the college football playoff for Georgia to completely ruin Tech's season? I mean, how much would you just love to completely ruin their season? Because I'm telling you right now, living in the media world that I live in, a lot of media people in my life, the media contingent right now is very excited about this game. Oh my gosh, do they have big plans to cover? The biggest Georgia Tech game of just about anybody's lifetime, I reckon. Oh, there are big plans right now. There is I don't know what you call it, contrarian part of my brain, I guess, that loves nothing more than the thought of ruining all of this and Georgia coming in, taking over Mercedes-Benz Stadium, taking what was supposed to be a Tech home game, painting the place in red and black, and then beating them once again. But we need a big crowd of Georgia fans to help do that. So mercedes-benzstadium.com/events to get your tickets. That is mercedes-benzstadium.com/events to get your tickets. You can do that. So think about the cocktail party right now, but go ahead and make your plans. Get your tickets while you can for Georgia Tech coming up Black Friday afternoon at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. One more time, mercedes-benzstadium.com/events for more on that. And before we wrap up the show today, can I just send a thank you to some of you, because every now and then it's kind of nice to hear something nice, and so many of you have complimented. Got the nice pullover here today. This is a Johnny O pullover. I got my Johnny O shirt underneath. Got the Johnny O pullover here. It's one of those things where it's cool enough outside right now that you sort of felt like you needed the extra layer, and so I said, boy, I hadn't worn this Johnny O pullover on the show yet, so let me do that. And so many of you are saying nice things about it. I really like it. I like hearing good things about me, and I also like wearing nice new clothes, especially kind of got the coastal vibe a little bit. I like that, a little bit of a preppy feel to it too, which is, I think, good for me as well. So for those of you who've noticed the Johnny O shirt, the Johnny O pullover today, I appreciate that. This is one of my favorite apparel makers right now, because they're making some really great looking UGA stuff. So I'm proud to be able to show this off in the show today. And sure enough, thank you to all of you who've complimented me for wearing it. I appreciate that, and I'm proud to have it on here today. And as we wrap things up, I want to give a fun golden shoe out to our friends over at Dawgs HQ. They shared this. I thought this was really funny. So it's a picture of Gunnar Stockton. Now, it's DGD Outdoors who had the original photo here. And you got Gunnar and some friends. I can't tell if those are faces I recognize or not. And Gunnar over his shoulder is... Okay, so it's Dan Jackson there on the right, I'm being told. So Dan Jackson with Gunnar Stockton. Gunnar's got the gator over his shoulders. You know, in Georgia, down in South Georgia, you can go gator hunting, and I don't believe there's a limit on hunting gators, a little bit like there is down in Florida with the pythons, I believe. So I think you can just, now don't take my word on it, but I think you can do that anytime you want to. And Gunnar, who's probably good about everything, apparently good at bagging one of these gators here. Our friends at Dawgs HQ share that. That is the perfect image. Take us into the cocktail party. Gunnar muzzling one of them gators and dragging it out of the swamp. We think that Georgia's going to do that again to Florida on Saturday. So we like all of that. We'll give a DGD, I should say a golden shoe to DGD Outdoors, Dawgs HQ, Gunnar, Dan Jackson, and whoever else is a part of all that, because hunting down some gators always seems like a pretty good idea to us. And you know what? Gator tail, I don't hate it. Pretty good. I could chomp down on some of that too here this week as well. As far as how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia, this is a very important number because it's really reached a historic level, up above 1,800 days. Hadn't happened a lot in the history of this rivalry, but today we are able to say 1,816 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. It is our Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a great day. We're back tomorrow. It's DawgNation Daily presented by ServPro. We'll look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised. The price is promised. You can trust them on that. All right, we're going to get some comments here at DawgNation.com. Going to be a little quick today because we got 80 things going on here. I've got to shoot another video in a second. So, going to be a little on the quick side here, but we'll run through the comments and find out what everybody has going on as we get ready to do all of that. Let's see what's going on here. A lot of quarterback talk over here at DawgNation.com. Speculating how other quarterbacks would have done in different eras, which is interesting. SEM dog on both Jake Fromm and Stetson Bennett winning the locker room. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly say from my own personal, I guess, knowledge of this, that would certainly seem to be true. There was real belief in them. And in the case of Stetson Bennett, keep in mind, you know, he did not play well in the Georgia-Florida game of 2021. And it's important to note that right up until the point that Georgia won that first national championship under Kirby Smart, there were plenty of people who thought it wasn't going to happen. And Stetson Bennett was getting a lot of the blame for why Georgia may come up short on that. And to give you an idea of how much Stetson had that locker room, even after what was for him, admittedly, a rough performance. That was the day that Nolan Smith spoke in front of the media and really very pointedly talked about how much he believed in Stetson Bennett, that Bennett was his quarterback. And he didn't want to hear, he didn't say it this way, but he said it equally as colorfully in his own way. He didn't want to hear any Stetson Bennett slander. That was a very emphatic message. And that gives you an idea of how much Stetson really did have that locker room at the time. HS Dog also says the truth is the defense won the first title, and then the second title, we had the most complete team. You got to go back and look at those offensive numbers. This is one of those things that gets completely forgotten. That Georgia was way better offensively in 2021 than anybody realized. They were essentially as good in 2022, and suddenly they were getting credit for being good on offense, but they were essentially as good in 2022 as they were in 2021. People just perceived them to be different. So if we go back to 2021 for a moment, Georgia was 9th in the country in scoring per game, averaging 38.6 points. 9th in the country in scoring, averaging 38.6 points. In 2022, they were better. They were up to 4th, averaging 41.1, but they also got 65 in the title game, which raised that season-long average a bit. That if you look at Stetson's numbers, they were not dramatically different 2021 compared to 2022. If you look at Georgia's overall numbers, they weren't dramatically different then either. Just the offense got more credit. It was probably a little bit better in 2022. I think that's true, but it wasn't wildly better. If anything, Brock Bowers arguably had his best season in 2021. That the perception guides a lot of the conversation. And people perceived Georgia to have a weak offense in 2021, no matter what the overall number said. But they were inside the top 10, 9th in America, inside the top 10 in scoring per game. That's a dominant offense. It is true that the defense was maybe the greatest of all time, and so therefore it got a lot of the attention. But that doesn't make the offense any less good. It's one of the great fallacies of Georgia football that the defense dragged Georgia to that national championship. Georgia's offense was better than almost any team's was in America. Let's see what else. So Jamie Scott says you got to get a tag and permit through random selection for the Gators in Georgia based on quota system in different hunting zones. So I said that wrong a moment ago. I didn't think there was a limit on Gators. There's something in Georgia there's not a limit on. What is that? But yeah, so there you go. I thought it was Gators. But there you go. Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that. I think the Gators in general are kind of a weird creature, putting aside the symbolism with Florida. You know, because you see these viral videos all the time, and maybe this is just the kind of stuff that my algorithm thinks I want to see. But you see these viral videos all the time of people gator hunting, and a lot of, now you shouldn't do this because some of this is, you know, whatever, but people have a tendency to treat gators as if they're very docile creatures, and gators are docile until they're not. It's one of those things where, like, you see a gator in the wild and it's not moving at all, and I think you trick yourself into thinking that it can't move. But when you see one that does move, ooh boy. Ooh boy. Let me go to YouTube for a second. G. Gray's talking about James Cook and Brock Bowers being game changers. Yeah, unfortunately, as the season went on, we got to see a lot more of James Cook, and he was used in some very interesting ways. It's one of those things where, you know, he is obviously, I would say, more of a complete running back now in the NFL than he was in college, and sometimes that just happens. Very good player, Georgia, but certainly a more complete weapon now than he probably was then. Jonathan Aaron asking about Brent. This may be Brent Venables. Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, hey, I think that right now he's probably playing well enough to keep his job at Oklahoma. I'd say that for right now he probably is. Let's see what else. Aaron Brown says Gators chomp, but these dogs will bite. I like that. DMar42 says Kenny McIntosh is so underappreciated. You know, I think he was certainly appreciated during his time here. Now, like a lot of very good players at Georgia, probably gets lost to time a little bit just because they've had so many great players. Kenny's one of those guys that became a far better athlete at Georgia than, I mean, I sort of thought of Kenny when he came out of high school as kind of like this bruising between the tackles guy. And he really became a weapon in the passing game and a really interesting player at Georgia, way more athletic than I originally thought he was. Thomas Dyson says, I'm not remotely, by the way, it's good to hear from Thomas today. He says, Thomas is one of our longtime guys, remotely worried about Florida, even if we only win by one. Listen, I'll take a 1-point win or anything like that. I do think that eventually, you know, success leaves clues. National champions typically win games comfortably. That if Georgia's a real national championship contender, it's eventually going to have to start winning games by a little bit more of a margin. You don't see a lot of national title teams that just squeak their way through a season. Eventually, they just build a little bit of margin for themselves. So I am curious to see if Georgia can eventually do that. And maybe they won't. And if they don't, I'll celebrate. I mean, listen, Georgia beats Florida by a skinny little point on Saturday. You better believe I'll be celebrating like crazy. And I'm pretty nervous about the game on Saturday. I'm pretty nervous about it. Tyler Puglisi says, what's your favorite memory of when we played Florida? I think for me, one of the first ones that does come up is probably the 2017 game, because that was, this is going to sound self-serving, but it was the start of the Gator Hater stuff. You know, we started the Gator, at the time we called it the Gator Hater Countdown. And it was after the 2016 game, every single day we said, hey, Georgia's going to beat Florida 345 days from now, 344 days from now, 209 days from now, 141 days from now. We counted down the game because we were really a believer at the time that Georgia, and this was all in 2016, we were only on a podcast at the time, we really believed that Georgia needed to make that rivalry a big deal. And never when we started did we imagine they would not just win the game, they'd blow them out. So we first did our first Gator Hater t-shirts. And I know that sounds self-serving. I'm promoting myself, and I'm really not meaning to. I'm just saying that was a very special memory for me because it was the first big initiative I tried to do on the show. And I was hoping it would work, but I never imagined it would work as well as it did. And we've been kind of off and running since then. Foster Moss says if BA's nervous, that means the Dawgs by 50, as he says. I hope that's true. I hope that's true. Spencer Clark says South Carolina deserves a better coach. I think the Beamer's doing a good job there. I really do. I think the Beamer's doing a good job. I'm curious to know if Shane would consider the Virginia Tech job, because in the right circumstances, I think that could be a pretty good job. But I think that South Carolina's a better job. Don't get me wrong on that. Honestly, I think it'd be cool to live. You know, South Carolina's only about an hour from the coast. I think it'd be pretty cool to have those ties to the South Carolina coast. I think that South Carolina is probably an underrated state. D-Mart says you got to survive the one-on-one deep ball, and hope Lagway hands us a few possessions. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably true. They're going to try to take their shots. You go back and watch what Lane Kiffin did in the early play scripts. Y'all, I'm not trying to pretend to be that. But you watch what he's doing early. It's pretty clearly, it was almost like a jukebox of, hey, here's this thing that Buster Faulkner did, and here's this thing that, Tennessee tried, and here's this thing that Alabama did. Certainly the Alabama thing with the running back. They definitely ran that play almost exactly right. So you got to, it just seems likely that Florida has been watching all these films, and you'll probably see some plays that feel awful familiar to some things that have worked against Georgia before. If I had to guess, there's going to probably be some of that. And I do believe they're trying to use the element of surprise to their benefit. I believe that is probably true too. Foster Moss says, how about Mark Stoops becoming a defensive coordinator if he gets fired? I think that Stoops looks very tired to me. Very tired. So at the very least, he's probably looking to take a little time off. I think the Kentucky situation. Hold on. I think the Kentucky situation has been pretty rough. I think that there's a lot of stress with the basketball team there. I told you this the other day, and who knows what's true. I don't know if this is true. Hopefully you'll understand that I'm just passing along the rumor. The rumor mill says they paid their basketball roster like $22 million. That's crazy for a 12-man roster. It's very expensive. Very expensive. You could almost put a football team together for that price. Probably could. And so it's hard for the football coach at Kentucky because a lot of money goes to basketball. And it seems like when Calipari was, I don't know what the relationship's like with Mark Pope, but when Calipari was there, Stoops and Calipari didn't get along well. Mitch Barnhart, the athletic director, wasn't getting along with anybody. It's been a pretty stressful situation, it seems like. it's one of those things that relationship probably just needs to come to an end because everybody's just a little tired of the other party. Especially, I guess this is my day to have, toxic empathy for the SEC fan bases. But, it's been a tough year to be a Kentucky fan because the only reason you still have Mark Stoops as your coach is because the A&M fans revolted and said, we don't want him. And so he had nowhere else to do, but to come back. And, just up the road, really, people don't realize Indiana and Kentucky very close. Bloomington not super far from Lexington. You're paying your guy $10 million a year. They're paying their guy $11 million a year. This other supposed basketball school is going to the college football playoff, likely for back-to-back years. That's a hard thing to see if you're a Kentucky fan. It just is. It just is. Aaron Brown can, what's the word I'm looking for? Encouraging folks to hit the like button. I appreciate that. On Facebook, Marshall Fleming says the only way I see Mark becoming a DC is if his brother Bob Stoops takes a Florida job. Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I don't think either of those things are likely to happen. A lot of these guys, once they've made enough money, they're only going to coach in the situation where they want to coach. Steve Rogers sounds like he's looking forward to the cocktail party. Everybody be careful, of course. Ken Oakham says the Tech game for Georgia is going to be the most meaningful in terms of the polls in many years. Yeah, I don't dispute that. It certainly appears that way right now, doesn't it? Appears that way right now for sure. David Wayne Carroll says Georgia will win easily because Florida players are going to be waiting for that great pumpkin. Listen, I like that because I told you before. In our house, we're very big Charlie Brown, Peanuts fans. We watched the Great Pumpkin 3 times this month already. Yeah, that's a big one for us. Big one for us. I didn't used to like Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, but now I like it a lot too. Always been a big Charlie Brown Christmas fan. It's essentially Griswolds in our house. We're just like that. That's just how we are. My poor kids. Rob Phillips wondering about Brent Key being a candidate anywhere. I'm guessing you'll probably hear his name a little bit. I'm guessing. I don't know, though, for the really big jobs. I don't know the Key has really been around long enough yet to be a surefire hire. And now if I'm Key, I probably want to take a big job before I lose Buster Faulkner because the way in which Key is viewed as a head coach could be quite different if Faulkner is no longer his offensive coordinator. And you got to think that Buster's getting pretty close to becoming head coach somewhere. But, for instance, people think, what about Penn State for Brent Key? Maybe they would want him. I don't know. But this is still a fairly inexperienced head coach. Ralph Price liking not seeing false start penalties for the offense. Yeah, they've been pretty crisp. You're right. And seeing that again on Saturday would be a big deal. I agree with you on that. David Wayne Carroll says, what if Georgia beats Tech and we meet again in the playoffs? Look, rematches are going to start happening more frequently. They are. And, it was weird for us in 2017 when Georgia played Auburn twice. Maybe a little less weird to play Alabama twice in 2021, I guess. But maybe that was weird too. But these sorts of things are going to be happening a lot more. They just are. All right, what else? Yeah, okay, so there you go. So I think Marshall Fleming said this. There are no limit on wild hogs. That's what it is. And that is some wild stuff. Hunting the hogs is crazy. Because those things are nasty. First of all, they will tear up your land. That and otters in a pond, they will just tear it up. So yeah. How does the wild boar taste? Does it taste porky? Does it taste like pork? I think mostly people kill them because they're a nuisance. They're not really typically, it's not really a food people enjoy eating, right? They're just a terrible nuisance, right? All right, what else? All right, let me hit every comment section one more time. Then we're going to bounce. Back at DawgNation.com. UGA Marine says Kentucky and Arkansas just can't get into full-blown hoop season fast enough this year. Yeah, I mean, Arkansas is into that basketball, man. They're spending money on NIL. Seems like they got a pretty good team this year. UGA Marine says, does Georgia allow you to hunt wild boar from a helicopter? I don't know about that, but I've seen those videos. Like, to give you an idea of how, and because I know in Texas and some of the plain states, it's even worse. I mean, they'll let you just like from a side of a helicopter, just that's how invasive the species are. I don't know that you can do that in Georgia. We don't have as much wide open space, even down in South Georgia. We don't have quite as much wide open space as that. But I've seen the videos of people hunting the boar from a helicopter. By the way, Randy Hall says he's going to be in Columbia soon to assist for the flight for the University of South Carolina's football equipment. So there you go. There you go. Randy works in the aviation field. SEM Dawg's favorite memory from Georgia, Florida, 1982, beat the Gators 44-0. Florida players had said earlier USC, whom they had beaten game one, was the best team they would play. Dawgs educated them quick. So that's pretty fun. That's pretty fun. Matty Ice 40 asks, would you like the game to move to a true home and home, Athens and Gainesville? I'm a big fan of the cocktail party. I like to preserve that tradition. It's just fun. I love the Georgian, northern Florida coasts. Those areas are really special to me. I love the fact that Georgia fans patronize those areas before this game. I don't want that to go away. I think that's just really, really cool. I'll also say this. There's the practical reality now, too, of in a world of a 9-game conference schedule, by playing the game against Florida and Jacksonville every year, you avoid the year with 5 conference road games, and you would like to not play 5 conference road games. So Georgia-Florida it's about to make more money than it's ever made, just buku gazillions of dollars. So from that standpoint, it's never going away. And if Kirby, who is as hardcore about home and home as anybody could ever be, deep down, he knows they need the money, and B, he doesn't want to play 5 conference road games. So I bet you privately Kirby's gone from hating the idea of the neutral site to now loving it because of the benefits it brings for Georgia. So Ralph Price says wild hogs are good to eat. So that's cool. Does it taste like pork? That's a fun thing to consider because I love some pork, man. I love some pork. You know, it was the other day we were at this, I'll get ready to go, but we took our kids to one of these, like corn maze type things. And, at the petting zoo, and they had the pigs in there. Pigs are just eating slop. And like, they're not the most attractive looking animals. And I'm like, man, I can't believe how much pig I eat every day. Bacon for breakfast, pork as many times a week as I can, ribs, all that stuff. It's like, I eat a lot of this stuff. These pigs are not pretty animals, and whatever they're eating does not seem to be very attractive either. But boy, I love to eat it. But I did not know that wild hog was good. But that's good to find out too. That's good to find out too. Jacob Alexander said I did that too well. Was that my machine gun noise? I think I just reverted back to being a little boy again for a minute. Made a lot of machine gun noises back then. DMAR42. Yeah, I mean, feral hogs are dangerous. They're dangerous. I mean, that's one of the things I think that's kind of interesting about hunting them is, to a degree, they can hunt you back. So yeah, I think that's all true. Ralph Price says it's just live pork. I like that. All right, we have got to go. Yeah, so Chef Jay Bowen, who, the man's literally a chef, he also endorses this too, says the taste is a little bit different, but it's just as good. Well, you had me at hello then. Maybe I'll go down there. Of course, just my luck. I'm going to get pinned against a tree branch by one of these things. But yeah, there you go. Jim Clark says Kirby will never truly love the neutral site game, but he'll just dislike it a little less. Yeah, my guess is when he sees that check rolling in and when he realizes, And there's some teams having to play, half this league's playing 5 road games, and we're never doing that. My guess is, which is one of these things, like, thank goodness the Texas in the SEC, because obviously they expect to get preferential treatment. Georgia always assumes it won't get preferential treatment. But since Texas, Oklahoma have the neutral site game, Georgia, Florida gets the benefit of now also not having to play the 5 road games. So we can probably thank Texas for that, because they're clearly, kissed into the system, of course. But either way, fun stuff. We got to go for now. Y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price promised. You can trust them on all of that today. Heating systems, they'll get you tuned up. By the way, I think last night, for the first time, we turned on the heat, upstairs anyway. My daughter wanted the heat on. So I think for the first time this year, we turned the heat on. So if you've not quite gotten there yet, when you do, is yours going to work? Well, there's only one way to know for sure. That's to get it tuned up to factory fresh specs, courtesy of our friends at RS Andrews. Y'all have a great day. We are back tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by ServPro. We will look forward to talking to you then.